Faces of Abortion is the only television program of its kind that shares the powerful, real-life stories of women, men, and families who have suffered through the destruction of abortion. You will be hearing powerful stories from women and men and families throughout the nations. Faces of Abortion touches lives and changes hearts in over 115 nations. You will also be given practical steps on how you can end abortion.
So it just overwhelmed me. And I thought the only way to escape the pain was to take my life.
I had a fear that I wouldn't be able to have my own children.
It brings heartache. It brings hurt.
And I knew they were tearing my baby apart.
I remember the cold feeling of the room.
I remember laying there and I just said to myself that I will never forgive myself for what I'm doing.
I believe that my life was spared that night just so that I could be here right now and say abortion hurts women.
Whisper, be silent no more.
Welcome to Faces of Abortion. I'm your host, Cindy Collins, and I'd like to introduce my co-host, Alan Parker, who is president of the Justice Foundation, and Clayton Trotter, who is general counsel of the Justice Foundation, and our very special studio guest, Connie from Louisiana.
Cindy, this week we're going to hear two amazing stories from Katie and Connie about their abortions, and one of them was even the daughter of an abortionist and how it affected her whole family.
That is so interesting for us to listen to, Alan. I'd like for our viewers to go ahead and watch that right now. Katie's story in her own words.
Hi, my name's Katie Arand, and I am a post-abortive woman. In 1973, I was 12 years old, and my parents were getting divorced. My mom was divorcing my dad because he was opening an abortion clinic. He was a physician in town, and I can remember standing in that little waiting room as my dad shared a story with me about how his dad's first wife died committing an abortion on herself with a coat hanger. And my parents did divorce. I became very rebellious after they divorced. I had a boyfriend, and we fell into sexual immorality. And my lifestyle I became, I didn't think much of myself. I had low self-esteem and all its problems associated with it. I figured since I had gone this far, why turn back? And I didn't really have any support or anybody in my family that was really encouraging me. I felt rejection from my dad. My mom was in her own little world, and all she did was, talk bad about my dad. So somehow I got through junior high and high school, and it wasn't until I was 23 years old that I became pregnant for the first time. And I was scared. The father was married, and I never told him about the abortion. Which I did have. I did choose to have that, and I went to the Iowa City Hospitals and Clinics, which was a couple hours away. I suffered, the shame, the guilt, just the trauma of it all. I thought it was the answer, but afterwards I had more problems than I did before that, and I was so paranoid to share it with anybody and so afraid, and I had a lot of fear and a lot of depression, and I can remember praying at the time and telling God that I would never have another abortion if He would help me to get out of this mess I was in. And then when I was 30, I was going into nursing school at that time, and I became pregnant, and it just seemed to be like the wrong time, and the father wanted me to have an abortion. My friends wanted me to have an abortion, and my own mother, even after talking to her, she said that abortion was the answer. And so I found myself back at that abortion clinic, and I felt like there was almost like a force that was holding me down on that table. I can remember being very angry at the nurse who was holding my hand, and just being so angry that I was in this position. I couldn't believe that this was happening to me. And I had wanted to keep that baby, but I was not brave enough or had the will enough. I was afraid that something bad was going to happen, and I couldn't do this, and I had all kinds of fears and worries, and that plagued me. But afterwards, after losing my 2 children, I suffered a lot of grief, anxiety, guilt, and shame. I ran from God. I didn't think God could forgive me. And it wasn't until I was 35 that God's grace, His Spirit, I know, just reached out to me, and I did finally turn to the Lord and receive the healing and the forgiveness that Jesus Christ offered to me. And then I began to walk in that freedom and began to really go through a grieving process through Christ and through prayer and just through being a Christian with the body of Christ, the other believers that I was with. And then when I was 40, my dad committed suicide, and that was very tragic. And I wish that my dad would have reached out to Christ. He knew about Christ, but for whatever the reason, he just chose to end his life like that. And so possibly he had that covenant with death. But I know that through it all, the one thing that I really regretted was just not having my children. I would have a 15-year-old and a 23-year-old, and the part that I would always ache and feel so deeply in my heart was I missed them, and I never would see who they became and who they were. But God can fill those voids, and you know, God can become everything that you need, and He is able to heal those places. And I know that my children are with God and that I will see them someday. And I'm just thankful that Jesus Christ forgave me for my past sins, because I had a very rebellious life, and I was on the road to hell. I was totally walking in destruction, but Jesus took me by the hand and He turned my life around, and I'm just so thankful and grateful to Him.
You've just heard Katie's powerful story of how abortion has affected her, even in her own life, of her family, of how abortion entered into that entire family and invaded their lives. Possibly abortion has affected your family, and you're crying out even today for help and for hope. We want to encourage you to please call our 24-hour helpline. It is staffed by women who have had abortions, who are there to pray with you, to listen to you, and to love you unconditionally. You know, Alan and Clayton, when I was listening to that of Katie's story, and that her own father was an abortionist, and how abortion just permeated through that family, and the devastating effects of abortion on her.
Yes, and starting with a divorce from the mother to the father, because she didn't want him doing abortions, and then the fact that even though her father was an abortionist and her mother recommended the second abortion, she still felt the shame and guilt of it. And the other thing that was amazing was that